Hey everybody, before we get started, I just want to remind you this episode is brought to you by our patrons like Ahaga Comics, Qua, Kylie Denton, Jeremy Vasquez, and Nestor Flores. If you like what we do and want us to do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. You can get access to episodes early and lots of other goodies, and it will really help us out. Thanks for your support, everybody. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll a 5-star. Once again, of the limited variety. Hey, we haven't come back to a permanent or a story or anything. Gonna warn you in advance, I'm in a little bit of a tizzy today. My internet has been up and down all day, which has made assembling assets for this kind of a pain in the ass, and FGO has turned away from some of its usual advanced warning and just been like, yeah, no, it's time for Kaldea Boys Collection. Boom. So I obviously have a very short turnaround window to make this video relevant and meet expectations of the fans. But also, I have no earthly idea if I can physically upload it on time. So, if it's late, that's why. That's also why if I goofed up the Patreon intro, that's why. Because I had to do that for memory. Because no, I'm sorry, patrons, I don't have your names tattooed on my arm yet. Because sometimes they change. That would be awkward. So yeah, I've been able to assemble my assets, though, in a limited amount of time. So we can go ahead and roll on this. And luckily, I don't have to do a lot of research or anything. But we'll get to that in a second. So, as a reminder, format-wise, FGO Wanted is a show which is usually broken up into 4 segments. We talk about a character's real life, history or folklore, their capital L lore and fate, their mechanics in the game, and then their rarity. Not their star rarity, but how frequently their raid-ups are, so you know when's a good tactical time to spend those precious Saint Quartz. And sometimes we talk about composition and, like, CE support and stuff, if it matters. So today we're going to be talking about Arthur Pendragon, Prototype, as he is sometimes called. Prototype Arthur, Arthur Prototype, Saber Prototype, lots of other fun names. King of Knights, whatever you want to call him. The one who was in the original rough draft of Fate when it was more of an, like, Otome game, where there was a female protagonist, which exists as the Fate Prototype light novels, and there's, like, an OVA and stuff. Anyway, it's out there. So, well, I guess let's jump into the history section, and the reason why I say it's easy is because Arthur is an Arthur. No gender flip, it's the actual Arthur Pendragon, though there's some slight fate weirdness, which we will touch on later. But in general for history, y'all should know who King Arthur is. It's kind of, you know, a big deal, a major cornerstone of folklore in the West, especially Anglo folklore, you know, and it was popular enough with the French and so on that there were lots of adaptations. There have been movies, all kinds of stuff going on about Arthur. So, yeah, we're gonna light on that, the, you know, extreme overview we do because this character is so popular and well known is, you know, it's King Arthur, child of a king, secreted away, picks a magic sword, gets educated by a tricksy wizard man, rules a really sweet kingdom called Camelot until some bad stuff happens. You know, the Cliff's Notes. Especially because there are so many Arturias, which, you know, that's the whole thing. But, commenting on the exact backdrop is really almost like I feel like a waste of space because you should know the Cliff's Notes version that I just gave you already, and there's no point in rehashing it. Unlike with, say, Merlin, where there's some clever details, the rough outline of Arthur is pretty much the same, and if you want to know your different versions, I don't know, read something like Le Morte d'Arthur or Geoffrey of Monmouth. You know, do that in your own time. It's big, hefty works. Some of which are classics of literature. So, Fate lore. Now it just changed. You don't even have the classic gender flip thing to go on it. This is mostly Arthur as Arthur. There aren't a lot of huge twists and turns. Was obviously going to be one of the central protagonists of the original version of Fate, what we call Fate Prototype now, and thus is a big deal in Fate Prototype-related works, like Fragments, the prequel, and the actual Prototype light novels, OVA, whatever. Where there's a little bit of relationship to the thing with the Beast of Revelation going on, but that's an entirely different topic. And I believe we'll cover somewhat in Arthur's Trial Quest, which we will get and give you some details in case you're not familiar with Prototype. Other than that, obviously in most works in general, he's been kind of quote-unquote replaced by the female Arturia in the actual Fate Stay Night and derivative works. Though there is a fun fact that's not necessarily related to Arthur, but is related to his universe, where he comes from. Merlin is female. And played by Ayako Kawasumi. So, with not a lot to talk about on the story detail front, that you shouldn't already know or care about, let's not waste time and let's jump into mechanics. So, let's look at Arthur. Pretty decent HP, also very decent attack. Before I had problems, I was able to double check. Arthur has the second highest attack of a Saber, only under Sigurd, who will be coming out next year. Which is kind of ironic because we'll talk later about, but the Lost Belt Sigurd is associated with is also a really great time for Arthur, but we'll cover that way later. So, decent HP, decent attack. Now that, that's only okay because you're dealing with an AoE Saber. Standard middle-of-the-road star absorption. Okay star generation, though, with his riding B that you can see down there at the bottom, and his one quick card. He can be okay at that, but you should really use a specialist. Arthur's NP charge on attack is very high. That compensates for the fact that he's got really basic bitch hit counts. This is a launch level stuff right here. No special flair, no nothing. 2 arts cards, 2 buster cards, 1 quick card. Typical Saber deck. AAQ, you can probably do some decent NP gen because it's so high, but you have a limited number of hit counts to work with. So you're either going to be doing a lot of work, or you're going to be doing some charging on some separate stuff. Very good extra hit counts too. So not really super exciting or anything here. Pretty basic stuff. The NP is much the same. You have a basic AoE buster. It's got 3 hits, so you're not like generating lots of stars or anything off of it. The normal damage multiplier. And as far as I know, because I had that page preload. Yeah, there's no NP interlude or anything, which is a little sad. The only unique thing here is that instead of most Artorias have this, NP charge thing, even Murdered has that, Arthur doesn't. Instead, he gets to increase own NP damage first, so that starts at a 10%, which is not really that great. But if you can actually get overcharge out of him, you can increase that pretty decently amount. So he benefits from rolling multiple copies or from being in NP chains to add that effect because it procs first. And of course, he does have 2 buster cards. You can always, AoE sweep, buster. That's a pretty good turn because jumping into his skills, he does start with that lovely Mana Burst A, 5-turn cooldown, increase your buster effectiveness for 1 turn from 30 to 50%. That's a pretty good slog. He's got a very decent attack already. So if you're trying to clear waves, or maybe knock aside some ads and then focus on a boss, he can do a very strong turn of that in general. And it's a really good utility skill to just have in there because they're buster focused. Second skill is Intuition A, unlocks at first ascension. This is another, minimum 5-turn cooldown. It's a pretty decent level. It's an A. You get 5 to 15 critical stars. But it's still an instinct skill. It's not super great because the cooldown is very long, and especially on a Saber, who's got, kind of like we said, a middle-of-the-road star weight, you don't have a lot of control over where those stars go unless you build your whole comp around that. So it's okay. I mean, it's a decent amount of stars, and as of yet, this one hasn't been buffed. God knows what they do with him, if they did. But, yeah, it's not the bestest, but it can be okay. Don't necessarily invest too heavily in leveling, but you can get like 8 stars at level 4. And then lastly, he has his unique skill, which was kind of tacked on there for FGO purposes. Gigantic Beast Hunting, which also has a minimum 5-turn cooldown. The basic effect is you get 20% MP gauge, so he actually has a self-charger, and then it gives you a large or massive special attack bonus for 1 turn, between 50 and 100% bonus damage on large targets. So, for a long time, but this was kind of the tragedy of Arthur, he's got an AoE Wave Sweeper NP, right? It's a buster. He's got a very decent damage steroid. It steroids itself minimum 10%. So you're looking at, that's multiplicative. That's like, I don't remember what the order is, but that would be like a 10% increase that is then increased by 1.5, or it would be a 1.5 increase that's then increased, that's then multiplied 1.1, because they're not the same buff. But it's still an AoE, so the damage multiplier is low, even with his good attack, which means that, okay, sure, you can double your damage against large targets, but most large targets are usually bosses, like massive dragons, large boars. Orochis are coming up later this year as, multi-headed snake creatures, but they're also usually a boss round. Occasionally there's somebody else with them. I think the only... no, okay, so now with King Protea, there are 2 servants who are large. I think there's both Summer BB and King Protea are both count as large. So, like, theoretically, they could be in a boss round with a couple of mobs because they're servants. But still, it's not super effective. that is until, remember how we mentioned Sigurd earlier? He comes out in Lost Belt to Pendragon, which has Jotun enemies who are fairly common mobs who count as large. So, it takes a little while for that to be effective. That'll be, over a year from now, like a year and a half. I think for us, that'll be either right around the same time or just after the anniversary. You're going to be very carefully timing with that because that's got Scotty in there, so. But still, that's a whole story chapter where Arthur's special bonus will actually be pretty effective, either just popping it and clearing up some guys or actually trying to AoE sweep. That said, still very niche. And no, they did not give Arthur a charisma. I don't know, they might do something with his intuition, because it's interesting, that's a character difference between Arthur Pendragon and Artorio Pendragon, is Arthur actually has a higher charisma. He's better liked, I guess. I don't know. So that could bring an interesting, team synergy component. But for now, he's pretty self-focused. You mentioned earlier he's got Riding Beast. His one quick card has a decent buff on it. And he's got a magic resistance A, so like a lot of Sabers, he's pretty damage resistant. Overall, though, kind of a selfish kit, The only reason why intuition isn't selfish is just because of the way star absorption works. Obviously, though, he's Merlin compliant. That would work out really well with him. Even though we're at a stage of the game where, because of the mechanics of break gauges, it's not super ideal to put all your eggs in one basket into one big swing turn. Can still be very effective at clearing mobs. Talking about synergy, he works with any Buster supports you've got. Merlin, Nightingale, Waivers technically anything support. Stuff like that, shakes. Whatever works for your team. Also, obviously, like we said, he's got a specialist use with that special attack bonus. He can probably benefit from a charisma, If you're farming, if you want to set him up, he does have a 20% charger, so you can just K-scope into an NP turn 1. If you need to, set up like a 3-turn farming setup or something. You'll have a very big swing turn. Depending on how many K-scopes or other support stuff you have, like in future, regular Artoria, who's permanent, will have a self-charger that I can't look up right now. But there will be opportunities to maybe set up some, basically line firing of NPs. Otherwise, CE selection, the usual, Buster stuff, maybe crit stuff, NP gain stuff, and NP strength stuff. So, Howling Princess, if you can land a couple of good chains in there or get a charger like Merlin or Waver, you can have some fun. Other stuff along those lines. Obviously, like I said, he's got a 20%, so he works with a K-scope if you've got one. And just in general, it's a little sad, but Arthur's pretty vanilla. He does have that attack edge that's pretty good. Like I said, he's going to be the top damage in terms of Sabers until Sigurd comes out, and they're not that far apart. And they're also very similar, it's just that Sigurd is single target, so Sigurd's a little bit more of a boss killer than Arthur is, whereas Arthur is a very decent wave sweeper for farming. But hey, he's cool. He's voiced by Sakurai Takahiro, the same guy who does Merlin, so, people like that. He's wearing a sweet hood in his first ascension, that's cool. So, Rarity, here's also the other kicker. Super rare. You're looking at this year, on this Caldea Boys collection, and next year on that Caldea Boys collection rerun. I know some people did complain that we didn't get a new servant, but on the other hand, Arthur did get a rerun banner. They kind of do that with Valentine's, though I did note that they did not rerun Nero Bride with her. She didn't get a separate... did she get a separate... No, I don't think she got a separate raid-up day. Or if she did, she still was sharing a raid-up with MHXA. So, I know that's kind of expected sometimes, with the way Valentine's works, but that's not a given in the format, so it's good that they did decide to bring him back a little, give him a little action there. But yeah, and other than that, there's no other raid-ups for him since, so it's a very risky Biznu, though you are looking at him in a fairly frequent number of guaranteed SSR pools, like the one at this anniversary, and etc. That said, that's always a big risk. So now or next year are a really good time to spend. And we'll see if he gets rerun again in GP. So, I think that about wraps everything up. Sorry, like I said, if there's not a lot of detail in the episode, but, you do one episode on a Saber with a capital S. You kind of do them all. Even as much as I love Arturian Myth, retreading that all the time does get a little old. But, fairly interesting. Like I said, it's sad that his design feels kind of vanilla and his one unique trick isn't very effective for a while. But he does have his benefits. And, he's got a decent attack. And if you need... if you don't happen to have an AoE Saber yet, or a gold AoE Saber, or you want one who maybe is a little bit more generally applicable than, say, Siegfried, who has a low attack spread, very high HP spread, and is mostly specialized at killing dragons, That's a whole thing there. Arthur's pretty good, and he'll have some interesting stuff later. And we do know that the game is slowly cycling out intuition. Artoria got an intuition buff. Both the MHXs have an intuition buff. Beowulf just got his, which is really good for him, right? Like, they pulled out all the stops to give him. It's also, I think, star weight and critical damage buff. So Arthur might get a generic attack buff or something in there. He might get his charisma tacked onto his intuition. We'll see. That is a future-proofing that you obviously have to look out for. Maybe he'll get an NP interlude sometime. I feel it's kind of a shame that our Excalibur wielders do feel a little bit underutilized by the game. But hey, he's there, and he's real pretty, if you like that. So, like I said, let's go ahead and wind down. Not make this video longer than it has to be, because, I'll probably be desperately uploading it in the middle of the night while my internet's back, and praying. So, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for your time, as always. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like, and leave any comments you have in the comment section down below. You can also hit up our Discord. That link is in the description. And, of course, if you're new here and haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Keep track of our latest videos. I try to do Wanteds promptly when the game gives me enough opportunity to do so, and also the fortunes. Shake my fist at the sky. And, of course, like it says at the front of the episode, consider supporting us on Patreon. You can get access to episodes early and lots of other stuff, and it really helps us out, keeps us motivated, and it's super cool. So, no idea when the fuck the next one it is. I guess we're probably gonna maybe do an Okito one in like a week. I don't know. I'll see if we have time for that. I'm getting a little busy. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled for Wanted, and stay tuned for a regular Let's Talk FGO later, where I'm sure we'll talk about the collection and probably Arthur's Trial Quest and stuff. And I'll see you then.